I'm Philip Huggins, and I'm here with a couple of really good friends in the Church Holy Trinity, Port Melbourne, where we gather regularly. And when we gather, John here and Galliano, Richard looking after the camera, we always begin with some time of silence, a little meditation, and some music of solace. Well, dear John, we're at a stage in life where we're trying to live from the essential things we've learned and live from the essence of our complicated and interesting lives. And you and I have been particularly focused on how we can help nurture a more giving and forgiving culture. And we know we're meeting as the UN has its Summit for the Future and on UN International Peace Day, and we know deeply in our hearts how much the need is for a sustained peace that means that the whole human family and all species can feel safer and free of fears, the kind of fears that are altogether too rampant. So we'll come to that, but just to go back to the beginning, there you were, a boy in Echuca, a young fella, and something happened when you were a young fella that's been one of those experiences you've lived from forever after.
It is, Philip. On my 17th birthday, my 12-and-a-half-year-old brother was killed. He was knocked off his bike by a good man who had had too much alcohol and was unable to make the right decisions at the right moment. And that evening, as we were waiting to celebrate my twin brother and my birthday, this dreadful thing occurred. And that night my parents had to switch off the life support. And from then on, life was put into a real perspective. And every birthday, so for the last 60 years, that video has played on the 11th of April every year. And
obviously an awfully traumatic event for the whole family. I remember you telling me, I never met your dad, but I really loved him from everything you shared about him. I remember you talking about how he responded in particular to that family tragedy.
Yes, the man that was driving the vehicle was a really fine man. He actually worked for my father. And my father respected him, liked him a lot. And when they had a conversation the day after, on the front veranda in the sun. My father, not much was said, and then my father asked how he was. Said he wasn't well. How were you, Jack? Life is difficult. And then my father said that he would forgive him. And I wondered what was going on. Because I insisted on going out onto the veranda with my father. And they parted with holding one another, and then I said to my father, "What's going on?" He said he needed to forgive, because to be a decent father to your brother and yourself, and a husband to your mother, I can't carry this burden. And he's a good man. And it changed my whole thinking about life. That in fact we need to let things go. And do it with dignity and so forth. So I started to then think, what is life about? It's about how we relate to others and to ourselves. Looking on a path of looking for all the research that has ever been done on relationships. Most of it wasn't of great quality, but some was particularly interesting, and from Kim Cameron's work at Michigan University, who analysed what is a virtuous institution and came up with 5 particular elements that I think hold fast in every relationship that we should form. And each of those is in every relationship we do form. And the first one is trust, and how that glues us together. It's faith, really, in one another and in self. The second is the thing that most interested me, which was forgiveness. And forgiveness is essential and is the most enabling element, in the sense that no one goes through life without making a mistake and having to deal with that mistake in one way or another. And it's best to deal with it constructively and without harm. And it's really quite interesting, the way I look at forgiveness is to look at the word forgive. It's made of 2 words, out of 2 words, for and give. You take the for off the front and put it at the back. You give for the relationship, you give for your partner, you give for the circumstance, you give for your team, you give for the parish, you give for the country. So you are a contributor, but we will always make mistakes. So the third one is integrity. And integrity I base as the intention, and intentionality is important. The intention to do the right thing, knowing full well that no matter how hard we try, we'll get it wrong every now and then. And at that stage, that's when forgiveness becomes active. But integrity is based on 2 basic philosophical underpinnings. The Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. So no one is licensed to harm another. And the second is the Golden Rule. So you're looking for the common good. Treat others as you want to be treated. The fourth element from Kim Cameron's work is hope. Hope is dynamic. Without it, we struggle. Resilience really is the restoration of hope. It comes from the old 14th century English word respair, which is the restoration of hope after a period of despair. And the final, of the 5th, is compassion. And compassion is really empathy, action through care, because the most selfish person is still empathic because of mirror neurons. So the most narcissistic can be empathic, but they don't care, and a compassionate person does. So I define compassion as empathy, action through care.
maybe Gal can play a bit and we'll come back to draw the connection between that moment with your dad on the veranda and then those learnings that you've just summarised. So there's your dad on that veranda, and letting you know before that chap came that he liked and respected that he was going to try and pass on that message of forgiveness. I mean, I don't know what else you were like as a 17-year-old, but thinking back, I was pretty much in a fog myself. So it's quite amazing to think what a gift that was, and how you don't know, you might have come to the same way of life from the same vocational direction through other circumstances, but what a gift that was from your dad in terms of giving you a clarity about what matters.
Oh, there's no question. I was precociously able at sport, and I wondered how I was able to do that. And you make so many mistakes in life, and why was I able to achieve? And it got me thinking about that I gave myself a break when I made a mistake. And I looked across at my friends and who were struggling, and they didn't. They made it really difficult. And I looked very closely then when I started teaching and wondered, how could you perform at your best? And in so doing, how could you be resilient? And to perform at your best, to get into flow, to get into the zone, you have to forgive yourself when you make those little errors, when you drop the catch or whatever it might be. You have to when you're learning, because you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. So you have to give yourself a break when you get something wrong. And it's from there that you begin to learn, rather than it's the end of learning. And this is really interesting. And I sang in an Anglican choir, a small church in Echuca, and I listened carefully, and I understood that the only request in a Christian sense in the New Testament was to forgive. All the rest to me seemed a little bit like gossip, but it all headed in the same direction, that in fact the request was to perhaps stop all the warring and tribal dislocation that had really been addressed in some ways, but not managed in a way that was responsible, or the obligations we have in living a relational life. We have enormous obligations to others, but the relationship of trust, forgiveness, integrity, hope and compassion, of course the primary relationship we have is with ourselves. So we have to deal with these sorts of challenges moment to moment. We can't avoid them. And if we deal with them in a constructive way, then we need to exercise forgiveness.
You've said to me times that a rough definition of culture is that a culture is the history of relationships up to a certain time. When we're in a particular culture, we're really, in terms of its opportunities and its limitations, where that's all defined by what has been history of relationships in that place. Whether there's been a forgiving spirit, whether there's been a compassionate spirit, or the reverse. And aware of this being UN International Day of Peace, we're terribly aware of the damage human beings have done with and to each other in an unforgiving, relentlessly cruel way. People who never meet, leaders who never meet, nonetheless feeling they've got some capacity or right to kill other people and other people's children. And so we're in a culture, international culture, where cultivating peace is absolutely crucial. And I know from your listening to you, you're particularly trying to focus on the culture of young people and our schools to try and help while they're in a place where they all have to gather, that is in a school, we might be able to cultivate that culture of giving and forgiving. And I'm aware that you've been travelling all over the planet almost to wherever there's an opportunity, in little country schools, big urban, sprawling growth centre, secular state schools, faith-based schools. You've been going wherever you can to try and just encourage that cultivation of a culture of relational health. Have you got some stories to share from how all that's going? Mate, why don't you pause to tickle that Galliano play and you can think about what you want to share.
Lovely, that would be lovely. It's really interesting. The work with children and with adults who work with children has been uplifting in the sense that children get it very quickly that it is how you form a relationship that's critically important. It should be formed on the basis of giving, not taking. And in every circumstance, adult circumstances, in business, in all walks of life, but particularly in schools, no parent wants their child to leave a circumstance and move to another, and we live our lives totally in relationships, to move to another relational circumstance, of which most of the relationships we form in life are circumstantial, they're imposed upon us by circumstance. No parent wants their child to be known as a taker. No school wants any graduate from the school to be known as a taker as they move to their next relational circumstance in life. And individuals don't want to be known as that either, because in the end, takers end up alone. And it's fascinating to hear 6 and 7-year-olds, as we discuss what is a good friend, to actually talk about being safe, to being secure, to being looked after and cared for by their friends, to to talk to them about being in a team and what happens when they make a mistake that may jeopardise a performance at some stage by the team. How do the other team members respond to that? Do they give them a break, or do they punish them for doing so by isolating or excluding them? And so we look closely at each of those 5 elements. With children, we look at it from the point of their friendship with their peers. We look at it friendship with their pets, which is wonderful. And I often take my old dog along and we discuss, have we ever made a mistake? I forgot to feed him, didn't put the water out. Does the tail still wag when you turn up or not? And it's interesting to how they very quickly pick it up. It's probably more difficult for dogs because they've been, walking into some headwinds in relationships at various stages, and they become less tolerant. But I usually say that it's probably not a good idea to go to jail for 26 years to learn the functionality of forgiveness. So if we can build cultures on the basis of quality relationships where forgiveness is the enabling element. We do it in families, we do it in neighbourhoods, in nations. Surely we could do it from the United Nations point of view, looking at life and our obligations in a relational context.
You're making a bit of progress?
Yes, it's wonderful, it's uplifting. I've spent time today setting up to just work with one particular school for 270 Year 8 students, 27 staff, and we're going to be doing it with all their parents in the next month. Just a 40-minute session with the parents looking at what is a quality relationship and what they want their children to look like in a relational sense, how they want them to act in the relational circumstances, and then working through with the children each of those particular elements, having a lot of fun doing it. And it is a lot of fun. And the response you get afterwards, it's life-giving. And I've had the fortunate experience to spend 50 years or a little more in schools, and to actually have there's wonderful friends, people I've worked with, and students that I've had the honour of teaching.
Do you have well, let's listen to Galliano a second and then we'll come on to another part of this. You have a beautiful dream, a deep dream of us all in good relationships with one another, and therefore able to delight in this gift of life we have from the Creator, following that teaching of Jesus, giving and forgiving. It's a beautiful dream. It's faces some strange oppositions. Have you been able to kind of figure it out yourself why such sweet and sensible outcomes for the human family seem so complicated to be the way we live, all of us, all of the time?
Yes, we live in a world that is based upon, if you like, a legal or an understanding which is quite adversarial. And so in order to deal with the mistakes that we make, we need to be constructive rather than destructive. And so at that one moment when a mistake is made, we have to decide, do we heal or do we harm? And relationship reparation requires the person that has dropped the mark, dropped the catch, perhaps made the mistake, to do the heavy lifting to restore as best they can in that particular moment or in subsequent moments the relationship. But it's unbelievably important for the person that perhaps has been harmed or dislocated to not just sit there and think, well, it's not I've got nothing to do here, because forgiveness really does ask us to give a little in all circumstances, to give us a break. And so in the countless mistakes that I've had to assist students and adults to make, to deal with the mistakes in a constructive way, no one in the end has declared that it's not an obligation or a responsibility to perhaps do the heavy lifting and to restore the relationship to a circumstance again that is constructive. Often the relationship is restored and it is even more powerful than it was prior to. It becomes even more solid and respectful, if you like. So it's been really interesting to see that light up in a relationship, and we can do it. Lots of people feel that if you forgive, people get away with things, and that's a really simplistic and unhelpful way of looking at how people need to live together rather than apart. They should work together rather than apart. We need a template, really, of what is a quality relationship. And your friend and mine, Eleanor O'Donnell, wrote that wonderful book, The Relational Power of God, where she argues very sensibly that we need to have a template of what a really good quality relationship looks like. And for me, it's those 5 elements. And the careful way we go about resolving the inevitable mistakes that we will make that will impact others and ourselves, or that others will make that will impact us and others again. So it's just how humans live together.
Your dad had a lovely faith from the way you've talked about him in that little country church in rural Victoria, and I know your faith runs deep. Anything you'd like to share about how all of this work has given you a better understanding of the divine and of the divine ways?
The spirituality is that we all have faith. Many claim that in the secular world that they don't have faith, but it's really quite interesting. David Foster Wallace wrote very cleverly about this, and saying that faith is the thing that sustains everyone, irrespective of whether you believe in a divine being or whatever it might be. So across all multi-faiths, there is that one, I think that one thing that holds us all together, and it is the forgiveness. No faith doesn't understand the pivotal role forgiveness has in enabling people to get on, to be constructive, not destructive. And at times we don't think clearly about that. And unfortunately at the moment there are many that are not. And so we go back to that decision you can make at that one moment. Do we harm or do we heal?
Eliana might play a little as we draw towards the conclusion of our conversation together. Thank you, girl. We do what we can while we can. Can you put a few words around what you would like and hope to be able to do and see get done in the period ahead as we complete this lovely conversation?
I would like all children, you're in any school, to understand that their life is fully relational and that they can manage in a way that is going to be helpful to them and to others. And by doing so, they will be able to make the best contribution they can in whatever circumstance they find themselves, whether it be leading others or being part of a team. And so I would love all schools to understand that in fact we get relationships right with children, families get relationships right, then all the relational harm, and all harm is relational, all the relational harm won't totally disappear because we always make mistakes, but it will be minimised. So it's interesting. Everyone wants it. They're not quite certain how to get it. I think it's not as difficult as we make it out to be if we start at what is a quality relationship and work genuinely and confidently with children, because I know they can do it.
So you really want that the matter of how people make good relationships and repair relationships when they're damaged is really front and centre of the educational program that children receive.
Yes.
Rather than something that they're meant to pick up by osmosis or marginally, or, which has clearly not worked. You want that really central, so that
yes.
Therefore, with more confidence about how to make relationships and repair relationships, other things can flow, like they'll learn better, they'll have more delight in their daily life.
They'll be more resilient, yes.
They'll be more resilient. You want that really in the centre.
Yes, yes. And the longest human well-being and national well-being study that's ever been done, it's got to be nearly 80 years now in running, the Grant study proves that our health and well-being and the culture in which we live is determined not by what we eat, not by what we smoke, not by what we play, but the quality of the relationships we establish and our contribution to those, and the connections we form that are constructive.
And if we take this to the level of the UN, it's the same thing, isn't it? The relations between nations and between leaders, rather than a model where they barely meet and yet have poised to throw at each other these terrible weapons of mass destruction. If we were to focus through diplomacy, we would say through meditation, stillness, Galliano playing some music.
Absolutely.
We can have people at the United Nations really sitting with each other, considering where their relationships are up to, putting the effort into making the relationships better, healthier, listen to each other well, understand each other better, let go of some of those things, that work of letting go, healing the past, repairing what's taken place. We might be able to create a United Nations, a global family that's better able to enjoy the gift of life that we're blessed to receive.
I agree. And it's not, we don't want to have power over others, we want to have power with others and to lead effectively. Our primary purpose is to empower others to be at their best.
Amen. Thank you, Gal, as we conclude. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gal. Thanks, Richard, holding the phone. Thank you, everybody. Peace be with you.